All right, guys, Brian with VetteSource back here in the garage tonight. We're going to continue to work and prep our 8.1 Marine engine here for installation into the 2004 Yukon XL 2500. Like I said, I'm going to run through these videos fairly quickly, I think, barring any interruptions in my schedule, simply because I have other stuff that I constantly have to work on, like everybody that does this type of work. We're in the automobile business for a living, so you've always got other things happening as well. So anyway, what we're gonna do, we're gonna start off, of course, to get this out of here. We're gonna have to take this off tonight. This will be our first step, and then what I'll have to do is pick the motor up. We're gonna drop the oil pan bolts down just enough to clear so we can get our timing case cover, timing chain. I gotta pick the motor up to do that first. So for our first step here, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go ahead and take this harmonic balancer out. I've already pre-loosened our main captive nut there, and for some odd reason this thing has, pardon me while I do this, I just had to clean that thing off. For some odd reason this thing has an old school style balancer on it, and the Marine one does, versus the newer style that goes on the LS, or the LS style I should say, that you use that 3-jaw puller to get off. So this is one of those deals where we're just gonna thread in our insert here, make sure that dowel fits in there correctly. Yeah, it does. Okay, we always double check, and all I'm doing here is I'm bolting in the arms essentially, or the that's what I'm looking for. This is a support device for this puller. If you've never actually pulled a harmonic balancer, most of you guys watching me, I'm sure a lot of you have done all this type of work before, but I go through it just because. And this is a harmonic balancer kit you can just go rent from down the street at AutoZone or something. It's not too stressful, fairly inexpensive to grab, and makes your life a whole lot easier. So, because you're not going to get this off of here otherwise. So all we're going to do is I'm threading this through here, the insert, and this will be obviously there to protect the dowel portion inside there that you may or may not be able to see right there. Maybe we'd do better with a little light on this. Let's see if I can get my light in the right way. We're going to put that on there, and this is a pretty tight press fit on here. Of course, you do not want to try to pry this off with a hammer or any of the other such silliness that I've seen people attempt to do to get these off. But like I said, this Marine balancer is completely different from the other. It must simply be because primarily we're only running one accessory piece, which would be the water pump on these. So I'm assuming that's why, because you'll see it's got a smaller diameter pulley here with, of course, our balancer section and an extra piece on the back. But it is curious and interesting. But of course we'll set that stuff aside just because, and then we're going to see if this actually works, because that's having to go in there pretty deep, but should be okay. Let's see here. So this will be the last few steps we have to commit to before we get and move into this, putting this engine into our Yukon, our rebuild project there. So I'm just going to tighten this up and make sure our bolts are tight, and I'm going to make sure I'm even, just so I don't have anything weird going on, pulling at an angle. So we're just going to go ahead. Now I know a lot of guys will just whip through this, put an impact on the end of it. I like to just make sure. Look at it, turn the crank. Come on, guy. And I may end up having to do that simply because this is really in here. Good. Let's see. Oh, there it went. Let's see. Yeah, we're getting there. It's just slow. Because the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to mess up the keyway or the bolt threads here on the crank. And it's coming off of there. It just doesn't want to come off of there quickly. Move that out of my way. All right. Coming out of there nicely. I am going to say that is one tight fit though, guys. And of course, if you get in this deep into a motor, this is basically, for most of the old schools type stuff, this is the most complicated tool you're going to need, other than the crankshaft gear puller, to get the new timing chain set on there. And of course, that's what we're doing here. Is we're having to, Lord, this thing is pressed on all the way. We're having to do this so that we can change this double roller timing chain and the cover, and of course, and our earlier style camshaft position sensor, which is now made of that rare earth metal unobtainium, because they changed the style. I think in 03 is when I changed it. So this cover and this position sensor physically won't even work on that 04 engine at all. Wow, that is one very deep shaft, guys. And I'm starting to wonder here. I'm going to run out of my puller may actually bottom out before I get this thing off of here. Now, isn't that interesting? I may end up having to use this extension. All right, hang on. Let's back this out. Usually that does the trick. In this case, we've got very much longer than normal outer shaft here. Let's see here. I don't even know if that's gonna work for me, guys. Let's take a look here real quick. Let's take a look at this real quick and we'll see how much extra this is going to give us. Never actually had to use the adapter portion in this before, because usually by now we're out of here. So let's see what we're working with here. Oh, and you know what? As a matter of fact, even though guys do like to use it, it straight up tells you don't use the impact wrench. So give me a few seconds. I'm going to sort this out. I'll be right back. All right, of course, we're back. It always helps if you remember to use the shorter bolts that come in the kit, but I digress. So anyway, far from perfect, but I can be taught. That's what my wife says still. So anyway, we'll go ahead and finish up getting this guy out of here, of course, with our hand tools. Now that they actually bother to tell you in the kit, don't use an impact wrench on it, which is always wise because I actually like impact power tools, but the truth is there's a lot of applications where they're not applicable. In fact, I saw a guy just recently using a power tool to take off radiator clamp off hoses, and I kind of was bewildered by that. But again, everybody has their own way of doing things, so I don't usually make a whole lot of comments. But there we go. Oh, that sucker's heavy too, guys. So there is our marine balancer, and of course there is our threaded end, all nice and neat, since we didn't stress this out. What you'll see here, you can actually see underneath here, that's the lip, the sealing lip, and there's the gasket where that oil pan comes up, so it keeps this from coming out. So I won't be able to pull that out tonight. I'm gonna have to pick the motor up, but what we'll do is everything's gonna be stitched together here. So in our next scene, you're gonna see, we will go ahead and pull this cover off, get to our timing chain, pop the chain, pop our timing gear, which in fact, oh cool, I can see my GM part number in there, 1256-8790 for our lower, and this should be a double roller inside of here. Almost 100% certain, based on the specs that I've seen from back in yesteryear. So we will return here in a second, pulling our timing cover. So stand by, let me get my tools ready for that. Okay, so we're back here now to go ahead and remove the timing cover. We've got our engine up on a stand now, which is going to make my life a little bit easier. I had to kind of swap my stands around from last time. We've got our oil pan down just enough so that we can clear the cover, and you'll see what I'm talking about as I take these bolts out. So I've kind of pre-loosened these again. These will come out of here like this, just straight out. Of course, you can see there's a little bit of extra sealant that we always use in the corners there, even no matter how advanced the blocks are. It's always nice to have more sealant than less sealant. And of course, unless you're talking LS motors, those changed the game pretty much completely. So let's pull those out. Actually, that came loose for me, and we're going to make sure I don't lose my bolts there. Go and get these out. I think this is anodized just like the other one, but it's painted in the marine paint to protect it from the salt water in the environment. Man, I tell you what, people that like boats, especially open water salt boats, God, you go through, guys. I have to commend you and lots of respect for the extra amount of work you go through to make sure your boat and equipment stays viable on the water. So of course, this is just going to come off, and look at that, it came off really nice. So there is our brand new, and there we go, to our May 22nd, 2002 date code, which shows me this is the end of May production cover, which is pretty cool. There's a brand new, I wonder if I can get that gasket out of there without damaging it. I doubt it. But anyway, that's our cover that we're not going to be using, of course, because if you compare these side by side, the cam sensor on this later engine is a different size than the cam sensor on this one. And when I'm looking at this, I hope that cover's not cracked. Okay, that's just a casting flaw right there. I thought maybe that was cracked at first. That's just a, I think, I'm gonna have to look at that more carefully. I think that's just a casting flaw, but I'm gonna check it out a little more before we get all the way back together again. So anyway, we're gonna do that. You can see here, there's our timing chain. So let me get set up with my tools. I'll be right back. We'll do the timing chain real quick. All right, back again. This time what we did was take and remove our two bolts that were kind of in the way, because I didn't realize they were kind of in my camera shot there. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this upper gear off. Now, one thing I want to point out, excuse me, for those of you that have done this before, and those of you that have not, if you'll notice here, the white mark right there, there's a dimple. There's a corresponding white mark right there, and that would indicate for us we're at top dead center on the number one piston, either on the exhaust or the intake stroke. It doesn't really matter which way, but that's an important feature that you want to make sure of when you're actually putting the motor together, is that it's got to be exactly right. In fact, I'm gonna go just a little bit here, just because for my own sense of purpose, we make sure that we've got a straight line through there exactly, which is what we want. And of course, like I said, that just ensures that you've got proper timing on the gears themselves. Where did my actual gears go? You can see it on this gear, the new one. It's actually, there's a groove cut into that right there. And then of course on our camshaft gear, I have no idea what it is with my chain, my new chain. On our camshaft gear, we've got the dimple right there. So you'll see that when these gears are aligned together, those 2 points should line up like that. That gives you TDC number one exhaust or intake stroke. That's gonna draw, there it is, there's our chain. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and take this gear off right now. And of course, just 3 13 mils. These should be 35 to 40 foot-pounds, I think. Nothing too strenuous. Of course, it's always nice to work on a brand new engine. And there's no grease anywhere. As I drop. Okay. All right. So we're gonna see if this will work with us here. It may not. I may have to. Man, that is a tight chain on this one. Okay. Let's see if we're gonna be able to do this all on camera here. I don't want to get too crazy with it. There we go. Okay. Now, of course, this being the Marine version, this got the full double roller timing chain, which is pretty cool. And you can see it's slotted just like that other one. And there's a dowel pin coming out of the front of the crankshaft, which keeps us straight here. Goodness gracious, man. There we go. All right. And our original will come off. There we go. We're going to put that right over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to test fit other gear. And you can obviously see there too, if you're looking This again here is your cam retainer. The newer motors actually have these built into the feature, built into them. Keeps the cam from walking back and forth. And I believe on this last, I think it's only the Gen 6 and Gen 7 big block Chevys where, you know, I may be lying. It may be even the earlier ones that have these dedicated galley plugs, oil galleys, which is a cool feature of the big blocks. So we're gonna test fit this on here. There we go. And of course, making sure we've got enough room here. There we go. Yeah, and that gives us enough spacing. And then we're gonna put I don't know why. I'm just verifying real quick, guys. Well, that's exactly it. Okay. Oops, sorry about that, guys. Okay, all right. I'm just going to snug these just so they're here in place for the moment, and we will do our proper torque once we get everything lined up and installed. Now what I'm going to have to do, now you can see here also, not that it would move, but you can see with that dimple right there where I've got the straight line right there between everything. So that means we're still obviously lined up. And I only keep harping on that, guys, because that's one of the biggest things. Now back in the old days when you had adjustable, you could do a little bit of custom timing in your engine. You could actually set this 4 degrees advance or 4 degrees retard to kind of tinker around with where in the compression stroke that you could set your fire, right? So that you could do a little bit early or a little bit late. And that was a big trick back then for the hot rodders and such. So don't really see it anymore now, of course, with computerized controls on the new engines. But it is a neat older feature that's gone away. So obviously I'm gonna have to get a tool to remove this. This is a pressed fit right here, and then of course we're just gonna end up bashing this back on with a larger socket, which is amusing to me that that's what we still use, but that is what we use for that, to get that on there. So I'm gonna take a break while I go procure the tool we need. Now what I did actually invest in was, this is a Kent Moore tool right here. You'll notice this actually threads directly into the end of the crankshaft, and what that does, it keeps us from galling the crankshaft or destroying the threads that hold the harmonic balancer in, because if you mess up the threads on a harmonic balancer, you're in bad shape. You're gonna have to go in and try to tap it there if you can, or just tear the motor down and get it back done again. So one other cool thing about the 8.1, I may have pointed this out during the video I did on the 8.1 series. If you haven't seen that, you can look up there. You can see that even the front bearing cap on an 8.1 is a 4-bolt main instead of a 2-bolt versus the Mark 4, Mark 5, Mark 6s. So these really are heavy-duty engines. Lots of pulling power, lots of durability, and you know, there are obviously a couple of weak spots. Every engine has a weak spot if you abuse it, but these engines as a whole are very, very unique. So now we've confirmed we're dealing with a 20-year-old motor. May 22nd, this will be 20 years old. So I'm excited to see how he operates in the Yukon once we get this in here. So let me get that tool real quick, and I'll be back in a second. We'll finish up the lower half of this and start wrapping everything back up again. I'll be right back. All right, so back here again. Let's finish this up. And which should have just taken a few moments for me to go out and grab our tool here to get this puller or this lower gear off. Turned into a several week ordeal as I could not find the correct gear for us. Which was funny because what happened was every time I went to go get the rental gears, pullers, the backside there, this timing gear was so close to the snout of the crankshaft, I couldn't get the rental gears in there. So I ended up actually buying a pretty nice gear puller here. This is a ratcheting style. Gear Wrench makes this. I had to pay a little bit of money for it, but it's actually pretty good. Of course, I broke one other gear trying to get that off of there because it was pressed on pretty tight. But let's go ahead and finish this up. We're going to pull this lower gear. And then we'll be ready to go. So, oh, that looks like it broke loose already for me. There we go. Now this gear, I like, this puller, I like a lot actually, because these arms ratchet into place so it won't come off, really. It's kind of cool gear, kind of setup. Let's see if I can show you guys this. See that? That is actually pretty slick. It was not cheap, but honestly, Gear Wrench, that's who made it. But that was a really nice tool to acquire. So I will keep that in my toolbox so I don't have to suffer for these others. And of course, and there is there's our gear. There's our double roller. So, of course, you can actually still see the GM part number on that, 1256 8790. There's our keyway, and everything looks brand new still. So, since our video ran a little bit longer than I wanted to with this one, I'm gonna go ahead and make this a two-parter. This first part video here will just be our disassembly. In the next video, what I'll do is we'll go ahead and reinstall our new set all together, and we'll go ahead and redo our gaskets on our timing chain cover and our seal, put it all back together, and then we'll be done with it. So that's gonna wrap things up today, guys. I do, as always, appreciate you watching. If you got any questions or comments, let me know. You know, again, sometimes with mechanicing, it's just a matter of getting the right tools in the right place and being patient. You know, that's why real world working on stuff sometimes is not as quick as what some people might show you. But anyway, appreciate the watch, guys, and we'll check back in. Everybody have a great Memorial Day weekend. Catch up later.